probably never leave me. And it was not necessarily in my treatment, but in the treatment of somebody else that I observed. This is this person who's unable to speak. And she's, having that treatment. They have lasers, they have music going. And I think the whole office came in and started singing this song together to encourage her to be able to speak. And you just don't find that everywhere. That compassion for someone, and that the uniqueness to come and want to be a part of it and sing with joy and love, like that will probably never leave my mind. Like I honestly, I got goosebumps when I was watching it, and I thought, oh, God is most definitely present here.
So as a caregiver, you hold so much of their trauma in yourself. For me personally, I was trying to take his trauma, trying to take his pain, trying to take all of that into my own body so that he didn't have to feel that. And I thought that I had let it go, but until I sat with Dr. Jerry, I had not let go of it, obviously, because I still felt that tension in my body. But as soon as she did that to me, it was like a full release of just everything. And I let out a huge breath, and Jaden let out a huge breath at the exact same time that I did. We're so connected that if I let my trauma go from this situation, he'll feel that trauma leave his body too. And then he can feel the peace, then I think he has the opportunity to heal.
We have some new technology. This is SoftWave. I'm extremely excited about this for multiple reasons. We're one of the first clinics in the world to be using it for brain applications. I've had some firsthand experience on some amazing regenerative capacity with this machine on what it can do for the brain, restoring function extremely quickly, getting people out of pain faster than I've ever seen before. I've literally seen, even this week, I've seen primitive reflexes literally inhibit or integrate faster than I've ever seen before when we use it on the brain, but then also specifically for those primitive reflexes. We're the first to do it, that kind of application, which is really exciting. We'll continue to do some pilot studies. We're working in collaboration with SoftWave to do those research studies. So extremely excited. We're also using this now in combination with our B-cell procedure, using it before and after to help enhance the stem cells, which it is clinically proven, but also proven in the research to enhance, upregulate that stem cell response. So very excited about that.
Or eating. I'll probably be eating. Okay, so I want to go over several big topics. Through the past year, we've really been focusing a lot on how light influences life, both at this big 30,000 foot view level, but then also at this tiny little cellular, but even atomic and subatomic level. So I want to introduce some really big topics and then boil it down, and we'll get creative, we'll get interactive. I'll have some of you people come up here on the stage, and we'll really start to understand how this thing called life happens. I'm going to introduce you to some concepts that have been pioneered by Dr. Douglas Wallace. He just won the Franklin Medal not too long ago. He's probably going to win a Nobel Prize. He's done a lot of research and pioneering work on the mitochondria. And so a lot of today's discussion is going to focus on the mitochondria. So it's going to be fun. Before we get into that, I just want you to understand where we come from, right? We, and when I say we, I'm talking about collectively us in NeuroSolution. There's 4 clinics now. There's us in Austin. There's Lake Charles. There's Atlanta. Now we're opening in Dubai. We continue to expand just simply because this stuff works, right? What we've pioneered, what we've developed, it works. But underneath all that is this concept of never accept never. And I love that, right? Yeah, absolutely. Because how many of you have been told you will never, your child will never, or whatever, right? And you're like, get out of here. And that's what you should say. Get out of here. Give me a new doctor. You're fired. How many of you have fired a doctor? Absolutely. Thank you. That's awesome. You know, honestly, this group is different because if I ever say that in another group, people are like, what? You can fire a doctor? Like, hell yeah, you can fire your doctor. Come on. Tell them get out of here. They work for you. So, I wanted to talk about little Millie because Millie's here. She's right in front of me, and she's on my mind. Y'all want to come up here because I want to hold Millie? Can y'all come up? Let me see Millie. Okay. This little beautiful baby is Millie. Thanks. You can come up too if you want, Mom. Okay. So, Millie is, oh, don't cry. A little camera shy, apparently. One of the cutest babies you're ever going to see, okay? They're all cute, I know, but you're super cute, okay? Now, here's the thing. Millie is the essence of never accept never, okay? So, and thank you for letting me do this. I already put the slide in, and then I asked for permission. Anyway, so Millie has this thing, it's called a lobar holoprosencephaly. I know. You tell him all about it. It's a genetic syndrome where she's saying never accept never. That's what she's saying. It's this genetic syndrome where parts of the brain don't fully develop. And if you were to just look at that, which is what a lot of doctors have done, they would miss the essence of Millie. They would miss this lovely life force that is here and the development that's taking place in everything about her, right? That's never accept never. This is what we do. That's important, but not really. Like, what we need to be able to do as physicians, as caregivers, is we need to be able to stay focused, not just on the anatomy, but on the energy and the information. And I use those terms specifically based on Doug Wallace's research, which is why I'm saying that, right? To really get the essence of what life is and what the full potential of life is, right? And then, of course, you have these lovely parents here that also embody never accept never, because you ever fired a doctor?
No, many.
Yeah, exactly. I may have fired a few too, yeah. So, thank you, Millie, for coming up here with us today. Yeah, okay. Here you go. Good deal. Thanks, guys. But the cool thing is that she's doing things that if you were to just go off of that scan, you'd be like, there's no way. But again, this is never accept never. This is like, what is life's true potential? That's really amazing, because then we have to start asking the questions about, okay, what's really going on here, okay? And what's really going on here is really hard to explain, and I'm going to do the best that I can to try and explain it. Now, yesterday, we were doing our regenerative medicine procedures. And I'm telling you, when we do this, and we're focusing our full intention on what we want. These types of cells that we use, they're called V cells, very small embryonic-like stem cells, and we use certain types of lasers that activate those cells, but we also have this intention that we put behind it. A mom yesterday, let me just paint the picture for you, okay, was on her knees, on the floor, and this was the last procedure we went through. I was drained. Dr. Jerry was drained. I was literally huffing oxygen between patients. And I'm not joking, right? I had my oxygen tank. I was like, all right, let's go, right? Okay? This mom just prayed this prayer. And you're going to hear the music behind it. We didn't capture this for me to play with you today. We captured this for the patient to take home and listen to. But I want you to hear it because, oh my God, it's just beautiful. And the music behind it is actually a certain type of music that goes along with our procedure to actually help activate the cells. So I hope David can help me out with this. I hope this comes through well. Let's see. Come on, David.
Father Lord, we give you praise. Almighty God, we come before you again. The word says, where two or more are gathered in your name, you are here present. We thank you for your presence, O Lord. Almighty God, you said that where two or more agree on any matter so touching here on earth, it is done in the heavenly kingdom. Today, Lord, I join the doctors, Dr. Allah, and yourself, and we agree that Usari is healed. We agree with Usari that she is healed, that this affliction is over. We bind anything that keeps her on the bed, and we release healing unto her. Father, Lord, you said, if anyone is lacking, should ask for wisdom. We thank you for the wisdom you have given the doctors, oh Lord. The wisdom to do this therapy for her, this procedure for her, oh Lord. I ask, Lord, as this blood material flows back into her, let with it come the power and the blood of our Lord Jesus Christ that raised him from the dead. Father, Lord, we thank you for leading us here, for your mercy, because we know that today, again, we will have cause to glorify your name and to see what our God has done. Thank you, Father, for Osari will serve you. She will be a generational leader, and she will lead many back to you. This we believe in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, in the name of the Holy Spirit, and in your mighty name, O Lord, we have prayed. Amen.
And that was just a part of it, right? Because the rest of it was very specific for that patient. It was the intentions of what we wanted those cells to do once they go back into her body. Obviously, that's really intimate for that patient, so I don't necessarily want to share it. But I'm telling you, it's not just the anatomy. It's not just the cells. It's the energy. It's the laser that's going in to these cells while we're doing this, and it's the information that is permeating the room. That's palpable. Like, if you think you felt that then, you should be in that room yesterday. You should have been there. Not a dry eye in the place, and oh, it was awesome, right? And what's amazing is we're gaining ground. There's more research coming out on why this is so important, why our intention, why these bioenergetic shifts matter, right? This is no longer esoteric. This is very scientific and provable at this point in time, right? So this is going to be good, right? So there's a synopsis. You'll have that. I'm sure you'll get the notes. There's a legal disclaimer. I'm sure you need to read it. I'm not going to. There's me. If you're not following me, please do. The YouTube channel's gotten pretty cool, so if you haven't tuned into the podcast yet, please do. It's the Longevity Formula. Most of you probably follow me on Instagram, but anyway, that's that. This is my family. This is why I do what I do. That's my crew right there. And there's a Longevity Formula. Okay. Current research projects, right? So this is not everything. I actually can't put everything up here, but I am looking into how various laser parameters influence stem cells and V cells, right? So this is, guys, if you don't think light impacts your cells, you're missing the boat, because you can actually look at this under a microscope, and there's other things like flow cytometry that we can use to actually see how you can have a huge impact at the cellular level based on the wavelength of light, the frequency, and several other parameters with the light, with the laser beam. Green is something we're looking into a lot. We're starting to use as well. I've actually developed a laser that does have a green laser to it. So how that's influencing our neurophysiology. And then not only that, but how we can leverage transretinal applications in laser therapy, because we can change a brain wave like that when we go through the eyeball. So that's super cool, right? It is amazing. So now we're looking at, I'm collaborating with neurooptometrists and ophthalmologists to figure out dosages, et cetera. But just some exciting stuff coming down the pipeline for sure. So I had a mentor. He's passed away, but he had this saying, and it's always stuck with me: have a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing. And I want you to have that resonating in your mind as we begin to go through this presentation, because we're going to talk about paradigm shifts. Many of you might be there, but if you're not, just hang with me, right? Have that mind that's open to everything yet attached to nothing. So, answer me this: what's the difference between a living and a non-living organism? What do you think? Did you look at the notes? Energy. That's fantastic. Who said that? Good job. That was awesome. Okay, she got it right. It's energy, right? Did you know in medical school and all these other allied healthcare professions, like, we really just look at anatomy. We're never really looking at the energetic component. But if the difference between living and non-living is energy, and again, a lot of this is based on Doug Wallace's work, so this is not like Crawford conjecture, right? Then why are we not looking into this more? Well, researchers are trying to bring it to light, okay? So paradigms. Paradigms come from people that create and tell, or I would say convince us, right, about those paradigms. The general prevailing paradigms in healthcare is a concept that anatomical issues drive disease, right? Now, obviously, there are circumstances where this is true. But how many, okay, let's look at Millie's MRI. That anatomy doesn't make sense with a lot of the things that she's doing. I have several cases like that, right? How many of you have had a doctor look at an MRI and really not look at your kid and say, here's your prognosis? Okay? I know we're in a church, but that's a load of bullshit, right? There's too many things that you have to factor in, guys. Like, this is a paradigm, but we need a paradigm shift, okay? The other one is that genetics drive disease. Now, again, true in some instances, yes, but that really doesn't carry over to the majority, okay? Especially when we start talking about epigenetics. That's really interesting. So, can energy depletion drive disease and dysfunction? And again, this is a lot of Dr. Wallace's work. He terms it bioenergetic dysfunction, and he will tell you that 80 to 90% of disease and dysfunction is caused by this. I'm going to walk you through, I hope in kind of an elementary level, about what this looks like and why this is so important. So there's a term, the verbiage I've been saying: life equals anatomy plus energetics plus information, okay? The anatomy is important, yes, but the energetics and the information, that intention, that vibration, that frequency, whatever you want to call it, all of this is coming together to culminate in this thing we call life. Seizures, right? Someone asked me about seizures. So a good kind of a segue here into concepts of paradigm shifting. I was working with a young lady just last week. She was post-TBI, and she had this severe seizure disorder developed where she couldn't even drive anymore. In fact, she actually had another auto accident while she was driving because she had a seizure. And doctors, what they do? They threw medications at her, right? That's what they did. And they said, well, I guess this is all there is. You're not going to get better. So what'd they do? They fired him, and they went and came to us. Within 1 week, she was seizure-free. True story. Amazing, right? And at the end of the week, I remember talking to them, and they were like, this is like a whole new way of thinking about things. They said it's kind of like in the Matrix, where, you know, you had the red pill and the blue pill. Like, we just took that red pill, right? And I'm like, welcome to the Matrix, right? You'll never look at things different. You'll never look at things the same. But I hope that after we get through with this, that you'll be on the same page with that, right? Okay. Who's ever seen this equation? Who really understands this equation? Because this thing is deep, right? I don't even fully understand it, so I'm not going to act like I do. However, over the past year and a half of having to better understand laser physics, I have kind of started to understand this. But the concept here to point at is that mass and energy are the same physical entity and can be changed into each other. And if E equals energy and M is mass and C is the speed of light and C is squared, right? So the speed of light squared, that means there's a lot of emphasis on light. Can we agree with that? So your light environment has a huge impact on your energy and then even mass. And then one can argue that even as you slow light down, you begin to then experience reality, and it's because of that speed of light slowing down. That's a big concept. And it's really interesting, and I wasn't going to go there, but why not? We have these eyeballs, and we have this aqueous humor, right? We have this fluid in front of our eyes. Light is coming in, and what is that fluid doing to the light? It's slowing it down. And as it's hitting our retina and all these ganglial cells in there, we're getting this explosion of neurochemistry. We're going to kind of look at that. You have this pharmacy right there in the back of your eyeball. You can produce every neurotransmitter you need right there, and it's all based on light, and it's all based on the wavelength of light and the speed of light and all of these things. We are designed to have this very intimate connection with light. And Einstein figured this out a long time ago, and he gave it to us. And a lot of people are doing good work with it. But I think in healthcare, we've lost it, or at least haven't picked it up yet. But that was a large part of the basis behind the NeuroSolution ESM methodology, right? So in this energy pillar, we acknowledge that. And we know how important this concept is. And when we're working with patients and we're progressing them from the energy into the sensory and the motor phase or the movement phase, sometimes we have to constantly come back to that energy phase, right? Anyway, today's not a discussion on that. But here's a heavy thought. If all electrons are the same, which they are, what differentiates them is the light that is influencing them. Your light environment defines your health and your light, literally. And this is a heavy thought, right? This is kind of up there with the E equals MC squared concept. We have to understand that electrons are lazy, right? I was just talking to you about this, wasn't I? Yes. So electrons are lazy, kind of like people. Are we kind of lazy? Not anyone in this room, but people tend to be kind of lazy. But what are we? We're really just a bunch of atoms, subatomic particles. But what happens is our electrons like to be in their lowest energy state, and so they'll constantly find a way to fall into that low energy state. How do you bump them into the higher energy state? Photons. Einstein also proved via the photoelectric effect that photons prefer to interact with electrons. So that's actually how we can change the energetic state of an atom or of mass, etc., of matter, okay? I'm going to bring all this together. It's getting heavy. It's okay. All right, so let's bring it down a notch. Let's just talk about these things called mitochondria. These things are in our cells. A long time ago, what happened was bacteria decided to merge with our eukaryotic cells. They said, hey, I think it would be better if I lived in you and I'd make energy for you and you could protect me. And I'm sure that's not how the conversation went, but in my head, that makes sense. So anyway, there was this merging of these bacteria. They turned into our mitochondria, right? Now, if that's true, which it is, then that means that exposures that harm bacteria could have a potential harm to our mitochondria. So that's a thought. Now, I love antibiotics when needed. That's good. But we have to understand that there could be far-reaching implications to heavy antibiotic use. And that's definitely a conversation that's not really being had right now in most healthcare settings. Okay? So these things are the power plant for your cells. It's easier to find in the research that light accounts for about 10% of your cellular energy production. You can also find that it accounts for up to 66% of your cellular energy production. Just light alone, not food. In fact, when you look at the electron transport chain, which we're going to get to intimately know, the electron transport chain doesn't use fats or carbs or anything like that. It doesn't. It's interesting, right? So this nutrition is super important, but I'm telling you light is more important. And I'll also show you and tell you how light shapes and sculpts our microbiome. Okay, our mitochondria also produce this substance called exclusion zone water. I'll tell you more about why that's so important, but it does act as a battery pack, okay? Let's see. Non-native EMFs. So I'm not gonna be the guy up here wearing, tinfoil hat or anything, but non-native EMFs are a real thing, and what people don't understand is that a lot of this high-frequency white and blue light are accounted as non-native EMF. If you take a nice juicy steak and you put it in the microwave and you cook it for like 30 minutes, is that steak, when you pull it out, is it still nice and juicy? No. It's all dried up and gross, right? Okay, that's happening at your cells. That non-native EMF is going to dry up your exclusion zone water. I'm feeding you nuggets because I'm going to pull it all together here in just a second, okay? All right, mitochondria account for about 30% of your weight. That's cool, right? Super important. They act as capacitors. If you want to know what a capacitor is, I'll put it in there for you. So it's a circuit component, temporarily stores electrical energy through distributing charged particles to create a potential difference. It can take a shorter time than a battery to charge up and can release all the energy very quickly. All right, mitochondria are from your mom. I don't really know what was going on here, but God said, we don't need that coming from the dad. We're just gonna let mom distribute that mitochondrial DNA. I don't know, probably a good thing. I know in our case it's a good idea. All right, but stressors, even from your grandmother, great-grandmother, this starts to influence the mitochondrial function of several generations out, right? So you were influenced by your grandmother and your great-grandmother's stressors, right? That's a heavy concept, right? And we're going to talk about mitochondrial heteroplasmy here in a little bit. So what was going on several generations ago influenced you at the mitochondrial level, and I would argue even below that. Interesting. That's a slide about mitochondrial heteroplasmy. We'll talk about it a little bit more. So this is the Krebs cycle. Again, I'm going to pull all this together for you. The Krebs cycle precedes the electron transport chain to produce cellular energy. Here's what I want to point out. What causes this to go? Who knows the answer? Light, and specifically that early morning sunrise light. That literally spins your Krebs cycle. That's important. That's beyond important, actually, because if you miss it, your cellular energy production is going down for the day, right? It's not good. So, like I said, the Krebs cycle feeds your electron transport chain. That's the electron transport chain, but let's make it more fun. I need 5 volunteers. Who's going to volunteer for me? Come on up. I got 1. There's 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's rock and roll. All right. Thanks, guys. I know you. Hello. Thanks for joining us. You again. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, man. I know you. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's our cast. This is the electron transport chain. So I'm going to teach you what they tried to teach you in high school and probably college, and you probably never understood this. I'm going to teach it to you in like 5 minutes. It's going to be great. Okay, so this guy right here, Nick, this is complex 1. He's complex 1. And what was your name?
Dania.
Dania?
Dania.
Danea.
Yep.
Okay, this is where I'm going to call you complex 2. How about that? Okay, there's complex 2. This is Kevin. He's going to be complex 4, so let's train spots. Let's have you here, and then your name? Mariana. She's complex 3. Kevin is complex 4. I'm going to pick on complex 4 a little bit. All right, this guy right here, this is complex, what do you think?
I'm guessing 5.
Your ATP synthase. Okay, here we go. Technically complex 5, but that's ATP synthase. Okay, now this in my hand, this is an electron because this is the electron transport chain, right? So we're literally playing hot potato with electrons. That's what's happening, okay? Catch? All right, now, what's gonna happen as these electrons are flowing through, as we're playing hot potato, is we will have hydrogens crossing the inner membrane space, right? So just imagine every time this electron goes to the next complex, a hydrogen passes through, right? Hydrogen passes through. And we're going to stop at complex 4 for a little bit, okay? We're getting this proton, what we call a proton gradient, which is there's a bunch of hydrogens up here. You follow? Okay. Now, complex 4, he's a little incontinent. So, he will pee his pants, okay? Now, when, I told you. Now, when complex 4 pees his pants, that's the exclusion zone water, okay? So complex 4 is going to produce our exclusion zone water. This is a very important substance. We have to understand proteins in our body do not work when they're dehydrated. They have to be hydrated, okay? But beyond that, exclusion zone water, this guy's urine, is very important because it has this charge to it. It is structured. When it is compressed, it will literally produce more electrons. It will act like a battery. Cool? Okay, hang on to that. That's another nugget. We're going to put it all together. All right, complex 4. Now, hold on. You're gonna be like this. All right, this is a basketball hoop.
Okay.
Now, if I were mean, this guy should be spinning at 7,000 RPMs.
Okay.
So we should be spinning you, but we're not going to. Okay. Now, if I were to be technically accurate here, we're not going to throw an electron here. We're going to throw a proton. We're going to throw a hydrogen, but for demonstration purposes, we're going to pretend like that's what this is, okay? Make the basketball shot. Bam! That had authority behind it. Good job, complex 4. That was awesome. Man, did you pee your pants a little bit when you did that? All right, fantastic. All right. Okay. Okay, so when that proton goes through ATP synthase here, we produce ATP, right? So we got exclusion zone water, and we got this beautiful substance called ATP, which is your cellular energy, okay? Are we following? Okay, now, what happens when you twist your ankle? Does your ankle get bigger or smaller? Bigger. What happens when you start going into heart failure? Does your heart get bigger or smaller? Bigger. What happens when you have a brain injury? Does your brain swell? Okay, so let's get a little further apart, guys. Okay, we're swollen. Okay, there is an injury. Now remember, this is in a confined space, okay? So the first thing is, are we going to be more or less efficient as we're playing hot potato? Well, let's see how they do. Pee your pants. There we go. Oh man, that still had authority behind it. That was good. Okay, so for every 1 angstrom, we will see a 10x reduction in efficiency of this electron flow, right? So even just a little bit of swelling here is not good. But what did I tell you? So this is a confined space. So we have all of this urine, AKA exclusion zone water that we're sitting in. And as we compress it, we get more of these guys, right? That's that piezoelectric effect. So we're producing bam, 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 right? So as we're losing efficiency, at least we're gaining volume and we're trying to push it, right? So we can heal ourselves, right? Cool? But didn't I tell you non-native EMF drives up exclusion zone water? That's a problem. Do you see how that's a problem? Because we lost efficiency, we have to gain volume of these guys in order to really heal ourselves there, right? Not only that, but if that's a problem, which it is, then if we're just sitting under high frequency white and blue lights all the time, and we have a cell phone attached to us all the time, and we're sitting under Wi-Fi, and we're doing all these things, we're continuing to dry up that exclusion zone water, it starts to become very difficult to actually heal ourselves. So this is referred to as mitochondrial heteroplasmy. The heteroplasmy rate, if you remember that slide from a few times ago, once it hits a certain percentage, you start to see disease happen. You start to see dysfunction happen, right? I did do a podcast here recently where I connected this to the autism epidemic and all the neurobehavioral disorders, right? Because all of that, seriously, when you layer all this information on top of one another, this explosion of light pollution, it's a very correlative rise with chronic illness, and especially neurobehavioral disorders, okay? So, a big goal that we have to do, yes, with brain injury, but with all chronic illness and chronic disease, is we have to bring these guys back together. Good job. Okay. Now, there is one other problem I want to bring your attention to, because we've talked about electrons and we've talked about protons. We didn't talk about the terminal oxygen, right? We have to have this oxygen down here as well to accept that proton, that hydrogen coming across, right? So those are your ingredients. You have to have your electrons, you have to have this proton gradient, and you have to have your terminal oxygen, okay? Right, Ms. Harch? Absolutely. Okay, there is one more thing. So I lied when I said one more. So up here we have this proton gradient, and remember we have this basketball hoop? Well, that's great, but what if we have an accumulation of something called deuterium? Deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen, but it doesn't fit through here. So no matter how good of a basketball player you are, you ain't getting deuterium through that. In fact, when it tries to go through, because this guy's spinning at 7,000 RPM, or he should be, there's going to be a shearing effect. So if deuterium tries, bam, there's a shear, and it increases mitochondrial heteroplasmy, right? So we don't want that accumulation of deuterium. Interesting, right? Yes. Cool. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. You may have a seat. Did that make sense? I made it all up. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You can all pass that test now, right? Okay. So again, what are the ingredients for a healthy electron transport chain? We have to have those electrons, the proton gradient, the terminal oxygen. But here's the thing. Light makes it go. Light actually spins that ATP synthase. Light will actually drive exclusion zone water production. Light will drive complex 1. Light can drive all of these complexes in various ways. So even if we have those first 3 ingredients right, but we're still in the wrong light environment, it's still not going like it should be going. Crazy, right? All right, so I did this question. You all got it right. Things get bigger and they swell, right? Okay, we got that. Fantastic. So the geometry within the respiratory proteins, those are those complexes that were represented up here. So the geometry, how close they are to one another, is the most important thing to focus on for health, healing, and life. Okay? We have two genomes inside of us, and we've been focusing on the wrong one. I'm talking about the mitochondrial DNA when I'm making that statement. Okay? So that brings us to this next discussion. What then is inflammation? And I just bring this in here because I know someone's going to come up and be like, but I thought inflammation was the problem. Inflammation, inflammation, inflammation. You're right. But what really is inflammation when we start to look at it at that atomic, subatomic level? It's too few protons or too many protons. That's a very simplistic model to think through, right? I can talk about it and expand it more. But essentially, remember, we need certain ingredients to make all this go, right? So that's really what inflammation is when we really get down to it. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about gut health and how light has a heavy influence on gut health. In fact, I love the saying, light sculpts your microbiome. If you want to know what the best probiotic is, okay, it's free. Take your shirt off, go outside. Absolutely, okay? All right, I love this study. This is interesting. I'm going to paraphrase it. So there was these group of researchers. I know Dr. Leach was one of them. There were a few others. And they wanted to see what the standard American diet would do to this indigenous tribe, what it would do to their microbiome. Okay, so they started feeding them crap, okay, like Fanta and carbs and all these kind of things that we in America, not me, but Americans, right, tend to eat. It was interesting because they noticed that it did not really change their microbiome that much. They thought, what the heck? That doesn't make sense. So they did notice that these people were running around with little to no clothes on all the time. And they said, I wonder what would happen if we put clothes on them and we gave them their normal diets back. And that's when they started to see the shifts in their microbiome. Very interesting study, right? Very interesting study. Really eye-opening, just to be honest, right? I pulled other papers just to show you, right? There's several points in literature to be made about how light shapes the microbiome. We can alter it in positive ways. We can alter it in negative ways. How skin exposure, right, just to light, again, modulating human gut microbiome composition. Constant light exposure alters gut microbiota and promotes progression of steatohepatitis and that's a fancy word for fatty liver, right? It's been reported that circadian disruption by constant light exposure changes gut microbiome taxa and their functional gene composition, right? Again, this is not like Crawford conjecture. This is in the research, right? So if someone is talking to us about the microbiome, about our gut function, and we're not discussing circadian biology and we're not discussing lights, we're missing a big part of the story. A huge part of the story, actually. There was a even cooler study, I didn't put it in. I don't know why, it just totally left my brain, but how 808 nanometers, right, which is one of the wavelengths that we use in our laser, actually can increase good bacteria in the gut and reduce bad bacteria. It's very interesting. Cool. So then, how do you alter your gut? You get under bad light, you put clothes on, you get under bad light, you spend all your time indoors, right? That's how you mess up your gut. That'll do it. I'm telling you, it'll do it. Research proves it. How do you fix it? Just reverse it. And I know that's simplistic, okay? So literally, be outside as the sun's rising, and I'm going to tell you the importance of that really low angle sunlight, right? Especially 250 nanometers to 380 nanometers, and how that influences a receptor or an opsin called neuropsin, right? But that first light exposure is so important, okay? You have to have it. You have to have it, actually. And then I want you to get the light exposure midday because that wavelength is totally different. That's a far infrared, penetrates deeper, right? Helps build your melanin stores, etc. And then I want you to get the sun exposure as it's going down, right? All of those, and honestly, like sun exposure throughout the whole day is important, but I'm just giving you like the key metrics because unfortunately we're not an indigenous tribe. We do have to be inside quite a bit. So that's really important, right? And I guess we can't really run around naked, right? I don't know, yeah. You probably don't want me to, right? Anyway, so, and I just told you, I didn't sell you a probiotic or anything. I just told you, hey, here's how you can start to have a huge influence on your gut and your microbiome. We can talk about more, but okay. So light's impact on neurotransmission and neuroplasticity. I kind of started to lead into this with my verbiage around neuropsin. I don't have enough time to get into the full circadian story, but I did do 2 podcasts over this, and if you have not listened to them, please do. I did a circadian rhythm part 1 and a circadian rhythm part 2, right? And I go into all the details about how light and timing of food can have a huge influence of your life at every angle. It's not just about sleep, okay? This is about how your growth hormone pulses and growth hormones influence your stem cells and influence your inflammatory status, influence your mitochondria, influence everything, right? Has a huge influence on life in general. So please go through, listen to that, and then circle back to this, right? Huh? So the podcast itself, it's the longevity formula. And I'm on every major platform, so you can go to YouTube, Spotify, Apple, I don't know what else there is, but any of those. Just look for circadian rhythm. There's a part 1, part 2. Awesome. Okay. This is a great diagram showing how that 250 to 380 nanometer light has an influence on our neurotransmitter production. So every aromatic amino acid has what's called a benzene ring attached to it, and benzene rings will absorb that 250 to 380 nanometer light. Even though it's not visible to your eye, once it gets into the retina and it's being absorbed by these aromatic amino acids, that pharmacy in your head starts cranking out some good stuff. And I'm talking good stuff that people go to the streets and pay a lot of money for. If you just get the right light in your eyes, you're going to be really happy, or you're going to be happier, right? Okay, so not only that, but it can have an influence on your oxygen status, right? It's really interesting how that works, okay? So again, this is a cool diagram. It shows how we can influence neuropsin and how we can influence dopamine production, melanin, adrenaline, norepinephrine, melatonin, right? Melatonin is interesting, right? So I understand sometimes we need to use melatonin, I get it, but we need to understand this. That early light exposure starts the production of your melatonin, but that melatonin is not going to be expressed until you're in complete darkness, okay? So if you need more melatonin, you can get that early morning sunrise, you can keep your light environment correct, and then once you go to sleep, we have to understand when that sun goes down, we're supposed to be in darkness. We're not supposed to be in front of a screen or scrolling on social media or all this stuff. Melatonin is going to be expressed when it's dark, okay? So if we're altering those light environments, we're altering our neurochemistry. So I just picked on melatonin. That's true for dopamine. That's true for all of these neurotransmitters, right? Once we get out of the light environment that we're designed to live in, our neurochemistry starts to go awry. Cool? Just another cool paper. Again, just showing how different wavelengths of light influence various things. If you're in the longevity space, you hear a lot about SERT genes, AMPK pathways, the mTOR pathway, etc. All of these things are heavily influenced by our light exposure as well. I won't go into too much detail on that slide. This one was a really cool paper. This actually showed how light exposure to your skin has an influence on your immune system. I love that one. You can really geek out on that quite a bit. Okay. This paper looks at how exposure to certain wavelengths of light influences dopamine neurons, right? And what I'll tell you is that high frequency white and blue light will actually begin to destroy DHA and can actually start to destroy our dopaminergic neurons over time as well. Okay, DHA is very important, and we're going to talk on that as well. Oh, we'll do it right now. There you go. So that high frequency white and blue light is going to destroy DHA. Again, DHA is docosahexaenoic acid. This is the nutrient. It comes from, most of us know DHA from fish oil, okay? It's a fatty acid, okay? This is why we have the brain that we have. DHA is amazing. It's able to transduce light into a DC electric current. So if you look at Dr. Robert Becker's work, he showed that you can regenerate tissue via a DC electric current. So we're able to have the brain that we have, the heart that we have, the gut that we have, because of this relationship with docosahexaenoic acid, DHA. But not only that, but how DHA is influenced by light. Okay. Areas of highest DHA content: brain, heart, gut. Okay. Where do you think our highest stores of mitochondria are? Brain, heart, gut. All right, fantastic. Do you know you can measure the what is it? I don't know how to say it. The electromagnetic pulse of the heart from 22 feet out? Yeah, so like, you people are in my heart field, right? But really, like, again, going back to that initial prayer that mom was pleading to God about, her heart field, I'm telling you, was the size of our whole freaking clinic, if not bigger. I mean, it was palpable. You feel these things. We just, we feel them, but we don't know what it is. This stuff is palpable. It's powerful. Okay? Look at this, though, the leading cause of death. Now, if you look at the leading cause of death, you're not going to see brain stuff at the top, but I think it's underdiagnosed. Degenerative neurological conditions, I believe, are one of the leading causes of death. So that's a little bit of Crawford conjecture there, but I will say that I could back it up. But definitely heart disease, cancer, these are top of the list, right? Okay, well, what did we just say? Okay, this high frequency white and blue light destroys DHA. And our highest stores of DHA are in our brain, our heart, and gut. And how many functional medicine doctors are going to preach how important the gut is, right? I mean, come on. Are the dots starting to make sense? Are we starting to connect? Yeah? You picking up what I'm throwing down? Smelling what I'm stepping in? Yeah? All right, fantastic. So we're living in this blue lit microwave oven that we call America. And we're driving mitochondrial dysfunction, and this is contributing to neurological disorders. That specifically was talking about autism, but it's talking about everything. This is talking about every type of chronic illness and chronic disease. It applies to brain injury, right? This is a brain injury conference, okay? If you're, just think about the initial time in a hospital, right? You have all the monitors, you have the acute care, you have all this going on. What type of light are you under? You're under fluorescence, right? And I understand you need the acute care, and we're thankful for the acute care, but we have to find a way to get some other wavelengths of light in there, right? This is a big reason why we wanted to go to Dubai, because our goal is to change global healthcare, right? When I go back, I'm talking with the Ambulance Association about these things. I'm talking with hospital systems. Our goal is to bring awareness to a high level, not just to a private clinic, not just to home care, but to the hospital systems. Because if these strategies can be taken in those acute care times, this is going to look better. This is going to look different, right? Healing is going to happen at a different level. And it needs to. Okay? All right, so our red and near infrared are what's going to balance the blue, right? So if we're in this blue lit microwave oven, we have to balance that with the wavelengths of red and infrared light. Okay, that's very important. The sun emits about 40% red and near infrared. That's important, right? So if the sun is mainly producing this wavelength of light, it has to be important. And by the way, yes, blue wavelengths are coming from the sun. Super important, but it's always coupled with the red, okay? UVA and B are needed in drive neurochemistry. Again, we talked about the 250 to 380 nanometer light driving neuropsin. That was just one example. There's many, okay? We need to restore balance, okay? And that's where we can leverage laser technology. That's where we can dial into the 637 nanometer, or the 808, or the 975, or the 1280, or the whatever wavelength we need to use for a specific receptor type, for a specific situation at that point in time, right? Whether we're going through the eyes. If you've been in my office, you're seeing we're going through the eyes a lot. We're going directly over the brain, we're going over the gut, we're going whatever we're doing. This is why we're doing it, because we do live in this blue lit microwave oven and we have to combat that. Okay, so here's your little cheat sheet, okay? So how are we gonna keep our mitochondria healthy? These are things that you can go home and start to do with your kiddos, with yourself, with everyone, and they're pretty easy, right? So let's get some proper light exposure. Red light is important, okay? So of course, laser's fantastic. You can get an LED panel, whatever, but we do need to combat that heavy exposure to the blue light, okay? So red light, infrared light, UVA, avoid excessive blue light in the evenings. I'm going to stress this again. When the sun goes down, get away from that high frequency white and blue light, especially if you're trying to heal a brain. So, if you come into my house and the sun is down, I have dimmers in every room, and I have an app, it's called Light Meter, okay? It's a free app, I think, Light Meter. And I will literally measure the light intensity in my house after the sun goes down. We want to keep it at 30 lux, L-U-X, or lower, okay? If you come into my new office, you will see that you cannot go any higher than 3,000 degrees Kelvin on any of the light sources in our office. That was intentional. And here is the interesting thing. When we started working there, it was almost like we were going through some withdrawal because we had some high frequency white light that we were under. Now, we always tried to keep them off and all that kind of stuff. But it was weird. Like once we moved into this new space, and I was like, man, what is that? It's almost like I'm going through withdrawal. And I was like, I am, right? It's crazy, okay? Very, very, very important, okay? If you're on a screen, you can actually go to your settings. You can actually turn your screen more red or orange, take the intensity of the light all the way down. Super important. These type of strategies can be very important. And of course, the blue light blocking glasses, you can do those too. But I'm telling you, once the sun goes down, your brain is not made for that high intensity bright light, okay? Okay, get your sun exposure daily. Watch the sunrise and sunset. Get outside midday. Melanin, this melanin store that you're supposed to have, I'm kind of losing mine right now. Melanin is another battery for your body, okay? You go outside, you get that melanin, you get that dark complexion, you get charged up, and then you start using it, right? You go inside and you start doing all your stuff, you start losing your tan, right? That is your body using its melanin stores. Super cool. Melanin is also one of the best chelators in the body. It can actually chelate heavy metals. Really cool story. I had a kiddo, I think they were from Australia, I don't remember. But they had very high levels of lead, very high levels of mercury, I forget what else, but they had a lot of different heavy metals. They had been through all different types of chelation, all different types of detoxes, and it just wasn't coming out. So I told them, okay, here's what we're gonna do. You've done every detox on the planet, every chelation, whatever, here's what you're gonna do. Your kid needs to run around naked outside. If they're inside, he needs to have LED panels going all the time. I don't want him on any screens, and I want you to throw his naked butt in a cold plunge. And the parents were like, we're paying you for this? And I had them drinking deuterium depleted water. Okay? I'm not joking. A month later, okay, we run some labs, and metals are coming out of this kid. it's amazing, right? I didn't give them the deuterium depleted water maybe can be considered a supplement, but super cool how you can drive just your natural chelation pathways like that. Okay, cold exposure, so let's talk about it. So if we also want to increase this semiconduction, right? So we talked about the electron transport chain up here. We talked about how electrons flow through that electron transport chain. If we want to shrink those complexes back down and we want to drive electrons through the system, we can use cold exposure. It was interesting when I was working with my engineers developing these new lasers, they said, man, the efficiency of those diodes, it skyrockets in the cold. And I said, it's a semiconductor. And they said, yeah, how'd you know that? I'm like, because our body also has semiconductors. As we have cold experiences, right, we actually increase the flow of electrons through these semiconductive materials. Bone is highly semiconductive, right? So cold exposure can actually increase that, can actually promote cellular energy. It does a whole host of other things. You get, vagus nerve activation, all the things that you hear on podcasts these days. So I'm not going to go in all those different directions, but very, very important. Now, if you're like, Crawford, I can't put my kid in a bucket of cold water, you're crazy, not going to happen. Okay, so there's a few different areas that you can focus on. You have the bottoms of your feet, the palms of your hands, and the upper half of the face. This is referred to as glabrous skin. So if you put your hands, your feet, and put some cold on the face, you'll start to have the benefit of doing this, right? Especially with autism, what we'll typically do is we'll just have the kiddo stand in some cold water, right? So we're getting their feet in. Typically, what'll happen is that kid just sits right down. It's super cool. Now, sometimes they don't. They try to get out. But just get those feet in, try to get the hands in, get the cold exposure on the face, okay? Another little interesting thing here, you can put cold exposure on someone's face, monitor their heart rate. It's really interesting. You'll see how it really has an influence on vagal tone. Okay? Deuterium depleted water. I love this stuff. Yes, you can get it on Amazon. Modern Life is a good brand. There's also Light Water, L-I-T-E, Light Water. Both of those are good brands. This is important because remember, we have this proton gradient, okay? So if we can wash away that heavy hydrogen, aka deuterium, we can increase mitochondrial efficiency. And there's lots of good studies about several different things in that realm. I'm not going to go in that direction now. Move your muscles. This generates a piezoelectric effect, increases that electron flux through your electron transport chain. Ground yourself daily. We are supposed to be connected to the earth. And again, not really esoteric. This is really just how we're supposed to live. Okay? Awesome. Okay, so I hope that was fun. I hope that was engaging. I hope you learned something. Just know that the NeuroSolution team, we're here. You can see Dr. Jerry Levine here on the front. She's going to be speaking at 5, so right after this. Do you know where you're at? I have no idea. She'll be somewhere, okay? Why don't you go see her? Dr. Ryan Cedarmark, back there in the back, he's going to be speaking tomorrow, 11:30. I want you to check him out. And then a few of the doctors from our Austin location will be here tomorrow as well at 1:30. We do have a room. I don't know what room it is, but you'll see there's like a TV out there. If you have questions about any of this, you want to come just hang out, come talk to us. I'm here today. I will tell you, my wife got me tickets to the Texas A&M LSU game tomorrow, so I'm not going to be here tomorrow. She did that in advance, and we didn't realize it was this weekend, so I will be at the Aggie game tomorrow. Any Aggies in the room? Where's the whoop? Come on. Oh man, good deal. Jill will be here tomorrow. As I've mentioned several times, I have created a new line of lasers. You can reach out to Jill as well. We've got a few specials going right now. But I'm telling you guys, I've had such a blast developing these lasers. They are something that has never been on the market before. I'm not going to bore you with all those details, but that's what I got, guys. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here today. Thank you.